Hey there, this is Tom with the Diogenes Lamp podcast. I appreciate you listening in, and most importantly, I hope you enjoy what you hear. Before we start with today's episode, I'm going to ask you for a small favor. Believe it or not, history podcasts, especially in their early stages, tend not to be cash cows. Shocker, I know. I too was blindsided by this news. Now, I didn't go into this for the money. I think that much is obvious. But unfortunately, books, research materials, and equipment aren't free. If you are interested in supporting this project, please go to patreon.com/Diogenes Lamp Podcast and become a member. When you become a member, you'll get access to bonus episodes, our Discord chat, and anything else we'll offer in the future as this community grows. If you don't want to support me financially or can't, that's fine too. I get it. But please, make sure to hit the like button on any episode you enjoy listening to and subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast listening medium. Your support is appreciated. Thanks for listening, and now on to the show. Who are those people by whom you wish to be admired? Are they not these whom you are in the habit of saying they are crazy? What then? Do you wish to be admired by the crazy? That's Epictetus. Good one, huh?
That's an interesting quote.
Yeah, it was a very, very old Epictetus. He's a Stoic, I believe, ancient Greece. Just a nice quote that I like. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Greeks of War segment of the Diogenes Lamp podcast. Once again, got Basil here with me. Episode 6, Little Moltke, Part 2. How you doing today, Basil?
How we doing today?
Good.
Great.
Good. I don't think there's a lag. I think we're just both excited, so we should be good.
Nice.
I got a knife. People can't see. I got a nice little pocket knife that I use to scratch my my musi, my beard. Not that my beard's anything substantial right now. You never use a knife to like get in there?
Can't say that I have.
Yeah, you should try. I highly recommend. It's a good way to get a good scratch in.
It's definitely badass looking.
Yeah, honestly, you can use it to scratch anywhere in your body. You just can't shove or make any abrupt, sudden movements because you might, do knife things and stab or hurt yourself. So I wouldn't recommend that.
Yep.
But like, if you have a little scratch on your forehead here or like right next to your eye, does it make you nervous seeing? It doesn't. I hope
just a little bit because you have a dog, and I'm just picturing your dog.
No, he's
barking.
He's a well-trained doggo. He's a good dog, though. He really is, and he is very well trained. Yeah, I always use a knife to scratch stuff. It's nice and sharp. Anyways, happy Easter, by the way. Like we say, Greek custom is to greet people with Christos Anesti. You say Christ has risen. The person is supposed to respond Alithos Anesti, which is truly is risen. If you want to be a real badass, you say Alithos o Kyrios, truly the Lord. If you want to sound really cool, which I like. I picked that up from some Greeks, from Greece proper.
I was just going to say, very Greeks that say that.
Yeah, those are the actual Alinaris, let's say, not us diaspora people over here. Not there's anything wrong with that, but just a different life. So anyways, where we left off last, Metaxas was climbing the ladder of the Greek political scene in the early 19 teens, and he had just been promoted to the position of senior aide-de-camp, as requested by the man, the myth, the legend, the Eleftherios Venizelos, right? So this guy's getting a ton of experience, just as we already saw, a lot of experience. At the time, he had an uneasy cooperation with Venizelos, and he still fulfilled his duties, but he was constantly suspicious of Venizelos. Specifically, what he was suspicious of, and I'm going to go over this, we'll drill down on this more, but he was suspicious of Venizelos being a puppet of this group called the Military League. which was like this group of Republican and liberal military leaders and generals. So I'm sure you're wondering, that's kind of like, not weird, but it's kind of like a side thing. Why would he be nervous that he's a puppet of like a group or like a league, right? But I mean, this was a pretty like influential group, like we said. It's full of military leaders and generals. They have the muscle, right? It's the military. We've seen this before.
Well, when you're used to coups, if you have someone cozying up with the military,
right? It's the 19 teens in Greece, right? It's good to have the military on your side. So, and as we're going to see, the Greek political scene is always just insanely cliquey. So you have Gounaris and other royalists were part of this group called the Japanese group. I shit you not, that's the actual name. Don't ask me how. I think from what I read, it's because they were like super strict or something. I don't know. It's in the book Ionian Vision. You can read up on it a little more. It's just mentioned. There was the National Society we mentioned earlier. There was the Revolutionary Committee that took charge post the Asia Minor catastrophe. And then there was this group called Aminas, which means defense in Greek. It's like literally the word for like defense. That was mostly Venizelos that were trying to do stuff on the side, like coups, and setting up an independent Smyrna state during the second half of the Asia Minor campaign. So like that's like another alternative history scenario, right? We could have had like a small statelet, like how Cyprus was its own independent state, right?
Yeah.
So I mean that's just interesting. And to me, like making a club or a group or a chapter is like a very quintessential thing for Greeks to do. Like think of all the clubs in Greeks. Like think of all the the Sylogo.
Yeah.
The stereotypical Sylogo. This region has a Sylogo. That every single region has their own chapter.
Cut it down even further from the region.
Absolutely. So just segmenting infinitely until you have like a 2-man group.
Staying united seems to be a challenge even back to ancient times for Greeks. They're just too independent.
Yeah, I mean, that's the take, right? I mean, it's funny how that works, but yeah, I mean, it always takes often, anyways, an external threat to unite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Metaxas, does his job, still super suspicious of Venizelos, and he's often during this time reporting back to Prince Andrew and the monarchists about Venizelos, because all the monarchists are suspicious about Venizelos because it's Venizelos, right? Mm-hmm. And at around this time, there is a French military mission that has come to Greece. It's like supposed to revamping. I don't know how familiar you are with like this age in European history, but like the French, the Germans, and the English are always at other people's militaries, like revamping them and fixing them. Like Egypt, the Ottomans, the Turks. I mean, it's still the Ottoman Empire at this point in our story. But they had all at some point received French, English, or German military advisors to like update their military and stuff like that. As you can imagine, Metaxas did not like the French military mission. As you could guess, he would have preferred a German military advising mission. Yeah, because like the German trip turned Metaxas into kind of a Germanophile.
Yes.
That's like, and this bleeds over to his perception of everything from military affairs to strategy, to culture, laws, especially to diplomacy, at least for now. The Germanophile charge on Metaxas is like something that's really held to his like legacy. Like everyone will say he's Germanophile. And at one point he definitely was, but things change. We're talking about like early 19 teens right now. So yeah. And speaking of diplomacy, in May of 1912, right before the First Balkan War fires up, Metaxas, along with the Greek ambassador Panas, play a significant role in negotiating and inking the Greek-Bulgarian Defense Treaty. So, pretty big deal.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, could you imagine, playing a leading role in inking a huge defense deal? I mean, I know it's up his alley, and this is per his job, but still, pretty big win, And as we're going to see, he just gets more and more accomplishments, bigger and bigger wins.
Nice.
So by November 1912, he's accompanying a colleague and a kind of a mentor of his, Captain Duzmanis, who, by the way, another commander with a great reputation. I mean, another top military strategist. By many, he was considered the top military strategist in Greece at the time, even by people and well respected by Metaxas. So anyways, they go to Thessaloniki to formally receive the city's surrender during the Balkan Wars, right? Huge deal, of course. This is Thessaloniki. So big deal, big city. And quote, this is a good one. You're going to like this. And quote, I have become, as you see, a great man, Metaxas wrote home to his wife Lela. And quote, I have become a diplomat, and I must wear a monocle. That's it. Yes. Yeah. One of the I things. That's it. Yeah. But I mean, hey, he's either going to be a top diplomat or the monopoly man. It's or he's going to become a hardcore capitalist. How do you say? He's going to become an oligarch. I don't understand.
All pretty much Greek words.
Monopoly, oligarchy. So I mean, really comical stuff. I know this all sounds like too ridiculous to be true, but these are actual quotes. And just remember what we said last episode about his life. Roller coaster. Up, down, up, down, up, down. So anyways, during the time leading up to the Balkan Wars, Metaxas continues to get experience in diplomacy via brokering treaties with neighbors like Serbia as well. He climbs up the ladder, and from 1913 to 1916, he takes the position of chief of all military operations.
Damn.
So, yeah, he's really getting up there, right? We're going to fast forward a bit. I want to get to 1936 and pretty much what happens around this time again, as we know, the Balkan Wars and stuff, as we know, as Greece dominates the Balkan Wars 1 and 2, and then World War I starts. So if you've been paying any attention, you should be able to guess who Metaxas wants to side with in World War I.
Germany.
Germany, exactly. You got it. Germany, of course. So during World War I, when the king is forced to resign at gunpoint by the French and British in 1917, remember this, we went over this in the primer, it's Metaxas who had already built up his own monarchist paramilitary and was telling the king via the queen's ear to go down to Tripoli in the Peloponnese and resist instead of resign. Right? So like they were like pretty close. There was the opportunity or the possibility of, Greek forces and French and Entente forces clashing.
Okay.
Right. This is, of course, bonkers. I mean, we're talking about some militia Metaxas made on the side to resist great powers like France and England, right? I mean, come on. And at the time, don't forget that it's like Venizelos still had his parallel government. Like the Greek government was still split. Remember, this is all in the primer. So, anyways, there is a brief skirmish between members of Metaxas' paramilitary and Entente forces, and this event will be known as the Noemvriana. And after all of this, the king, Metaxas, their families, and other Constantinists, as they would be called, named after King Constantine, like his loyalists, you get it, all get exiled to the Grand Hotel in Ajaccio on the island of Corsica in June of 1917. And just to be clear, Venizelos takes over after the king is ousted, and Greece formally joins the side of Entente. Again, and I feel bad going over this because primer shit. We've talked about this. Now, let's talk a little about his exile. While Metaxas is in Corsica, the whole time during his exile there, he's super paranoid, depressed, and apparently was heavily using tranquilizers.
Oh,
nice. Just like a typical Tuesday night for me. I mean, let me tell you, to chill out, sleep, and function. Because who doesn't need like a good horse tranquilizer to get through the average day-to-day?
The average day.
Yeah, I mean, keep it in mind too, right? Like, I'm making jokes about me taking horse tranquilizers to get through my day. My day is quite less stressful than being exiled to Corsica. Mind you, Corsica is part of France. Now think about the connection here. France just backed via gunboat diplomacy Venizelos, resulting in the ousting of the monarchy. Do you see now why he's fucking paranoid, right?
Yeah. Interesting that they were sent there, I guess, to get haven't watched on them.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. Maybe to keep an eye on him, perhaps. Maybe it just worked out that way. But
right.
So yeah, now the tranquilizers make more sense, right? I mean, he was paranoid that the French were going to have him assassinated on or something, Yeah. So, he's so tweaked out by the whole situation where he is that later in 1918, Metaxas, Ioannis, remember Ioannis, the guy who gets shot in the firing execution range after the trial of the six, and a guy named Pesmazoglu all convinced themselves the French are going to repatriate them to Greece and face formal charges. That's another thing they were scared of. Because at this point they have death sentences or whatever on them. So they take tiny fishing boats to Sardinia and then to Italy. In Italy, Ioannis, Metaxas, and other royalists are able to link up with political circles, and Metaxas is able to meet up with his family. So when Turkey joined the side of the Central Powers, Venizelos proved to be spot on with who to buddy up with in World War I, and the subsequent German defeat really was something unplanned for Metaxas, right? He was, remember, Germanophile, right? He was like, Germany's going to win. Exactly, yeah. He had no idea. To him, he couldn't perceive or understand how Germany could lose in his mind. So that kind of blew his worldview a little bit. While he is in exile, Metaxas, he gets a formal death sentence in 1920 due to his role in the Noembriana. But by November 1920, Ioannis cables Metaxas to get back to Greece as the death sentence had been commuted because the Venizelos had lost in the elections, and the royalists were back in charge. So remember, we are back kind of where the monkey bite happens, and the royalists come back.
Yeah.
That, monkey does all that stuff, kills the crown prince or whatever.
But if the royalists were back, why would Metaxas be getting the death sentence?
It was before that. He got the death sentence while Venizelos was in charge. So remember, during the whole, the Asia Minor campaign, the first half, Venizelos was in charge. He called elections. Everyone's like, why are you calling elections?
In the middle of this, yeah.
Right. Loses elections. Royalists come back. So, yeah. So the monkey bite happens. And just, again, just to keep that in mind, remember, we're at the point where the royalists, to a large extent as well, they don't really understand what they're getting into in the Asia Minor campaign. They win the elections, they go through with it. They're like, we might as well carry it on, but they're still not getting it per se, right? And this is just one of the examples earlier on in his career where Metaxas really shows his military intellect. So this, by the way, was Metaxas's response as to why he didn't believe in the campaign. After apparently Ioannis and Protopapadakis tried for 5 hours to convince him to take the position as commander-in-chief of the military in April of 1921. Right? So this is what he had to say. And, quote, because, in fact, you are seeking the conquest of Asia Minor, and without preparing it through the Hellenization of the country. It is only superficially a question of the Treaty of Sevres. It is really a question of the dissolution of Turkey and the establishment of our state on Turkish soil. But even if it were only a question of the Treaty of Sevres, we are an ethnological minority, even in the area around Smyrna. In the interior of Asia Minor, our own population is minute, and the Turks realize what we want. If they had no national feeling, perhaps such a policy would be possible. But they proved that they have not a religious, but a national feeling. And they mean to fight for their freedom and independence, precisely the things for which we have been fighting against them. They realize that Asia Minor is their country and that we are invaders. For them, for their national feelings, the historical rights on which we base our claims have no influence. Whether they are right or wrong is another question. What matters is how they feel. Wow.
Very, very interesting quote.
I know. Very insightful too, right?
Yeah. He's basically, I don't know, he has the logic there of like, don't do it.
Right.
Take what you want, but don't try more.
Yeah. And there were other things too that Metaxas talked about. Like in here, he talked about, the ethnological component that like outside of Smyrna and maybe some other centers it's just there's not enough Greeks, right? He's talking about also that clearly by us going in, we're going to unite them. They're going to see us as invaders, and they will respond. There's other stuff too, like he talked about. There's other stuff I read where he talked about like the geography of Smyrna and how there's just not the geographical features there are not good for a defensive position because I don't know it's in some valley or something like that.
Right.
But again, this is just Metaxas showing his foresight and his military intellect and his ability to kind of see past through bullshit and hyped up political promises or whatever the case to be like, hey, no, we need to be serious about this and not just get into this rah-rah mentality, groupthink stuff. So yeah. And by the way, as we know, the two guys that tried to convince Metaxas to be commander-in-chief for 5 hours, as we know, because we covered it in the previous primers, they were both executed after the trial of 6. So dodged a bullet there. I'm glad he didn't take that job position. He was like, benefits aren't good enough. Benefits aren't good. So yeah, dodged the firing squad. I mean, who knows? Maybe he would have escaped again, but I mean, yeah. So as the reverberations of the catastrophe are starting to hit Athens in September of 1922, and the Revolutionary Committee, headed by Plastiras, Gonatas, and Phorkas, demand his resignation, is Metaxas, of all people who takes the initiative, visits the Tatui Palace, the same place where Prince Alexander had been fatally bitten by a monkey just 2 or so years earlier, and recommends to King Constantine I to abdicate. And, quote, I tell him he will not return to his throne, but will live happily as a private citizen. He accepted all this. He simply wants to live in his own home. The queen is very dignified. The king says he has always had confidence in me and still has. A moving farewell. So ended the reign of Constantine. Interesting, because
sometimes it takes your own people to
tell you,
talk you off the ledge instead of by force. Isn't that better?
It's better. It's better. It's definitely better. It's just funny because, we know that the monarchy's not gone. The royalists aren't. Yeah. King Constantine's not gone. But yeah, 100%. Like this seems to be a very responsible thing for Metaxas to do. So no repeat of the Noembriana this time around. King Constantine leaves for his second exile, and he dies in exile in Palermo in January of 1923. So just to be clear, let's talk about this a bit because it does get quite confusing, and I want everyone to be on the same page. King George I had 8 children. King George II, who took over as king when his father, King Constantine, died in Palermo, was King George I's grandson, Prince Alexander's brother. Remember, Prince Alexander was the guy who got bit by the monkey and died. And he was also Prince Andrew's nephew. King George II, was Prince Andrew's nephew. Prince Andrew being the guy who disobeyed a direct order at the Battle of Sarkaria in the Asia Minor campaign and was thus exiled from Greece after the trial of the 6. And remember, of course, King George I had been assassinated in Thessaloniki in 1913. Confusing, I know. Being a Greek royalty has a high turnover. What was that?
Yeah. Got to pull out the family tree.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and just keep in mind, too, there's a really high turnover for Greek royalty. But even with all of these seismic dynastic shifts, Metaxas just couldn't stay out of the game. And on October 20th, 1923, just 1 year after the trial and execution of the 6, and 10 or so months after Constantine dies in Palermo, Metaxas is involved in a failed monarchist coup. I know. It's just so predictable that you're just waiting to hear about another coup that's failed.
Yeah.
Because it's not like it's just one side or the other. Both sides just are just always vying.
Just people just throwing coups.
Yeah. It's just a coup party, man. I'm telling you. So Metaxas is involved in a failed monarchist coup. This one is sometimes referred to as a Leonardopoulos Gargalidis coup. I think I said that right. which are the names of the generals who primarily drove the coup. So, there's still like a lot of debate as to how involved Metaxas was in this coup, but there seems to be a strong consensus that he was like definitely involved in the coup. He was definitely in there. The coup failed, as you can guess, and just 1 week later, he boards a Norwegian cargo ship, the Belize Sultanhof, along with his wife and secretary, leaving behind the kids. He had a second daughter back in December 1912, by the way. So eventually they make the Rome. Metaxas tries to get in touch with Mussolini, who he thinks can help his situation politically, but it doesn't happen. And we're at 2 exiles now for Metaxas in less than 2 years, 10 years.
Yeah, he should invest in some real estate where he's getting exiled.
Yeah, man. Can you get like exile insurance? My God.
Like, again, I'm thinking of the logistical stuff that would happen today. Like, what's going on with my 401k? Like, who's paying my taxes?
Like, honey, I got to jump on this Norwegian cargo ship. I'll be back in a year. Jeez, this really throws a monkey wrench in my plans. Gosh. Jeez, yeah. Wasn't planning on this again. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I guess people had a lot less stuff like going on back then, so like it would have been. I feel like back then it was easier just to like get exiled for 10 years on like a Wednesday afternoon.
Right. It's
you know what I mean?
The course. Right.
It's like, come on, man. Like, how many like what your 9 to 5 is going to get mad?
Packs his monocle and his German history book and just takes off.
He's on his way. Yeah. So I mean, another exile, but by 1924, due to changes in the Greek political leadership, Metaxas was able to get back to Greece, and his party, Eleftherophrones, or Free Thinkers Party, participated in the November 1926 elections, where they had something, not like a bad showing, but something like 20% of the parliament. So not bad. Metaxas and his Free Thinkers, as they're called, become part of an all-party government headed by Alexandros Zaimis, and Metaxas becomes an actual minister of ruling cabinet, of a minister within the ruling cabinet, specifically Minister of Communications, which sounds like a funny title for like the 1926.
Yeah, gonna send telegrams.
I mean, yeah, I guess they have telegrams, yeah, to be fair, but when I heard that, I was just like, that's funny. Like, come on.
It sounds like a LinkedIn position now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you guys, come on. What communication are you really doing aside from telegram and paper? Anyways, shortly after the election in 1928, the Free Thinkers flop. And Metaxas loses his position, and as a result, decides to leave politics for a second time. The next 4 years are, generally speaking, all pretty terrible for Metaxas. One of his daughters develops an illness that was difficult to diagnose, and Metaxas' own health became especially monitored. And while there seemed to be some minor health issues, there didn't appear to be actually anything serious going on, at least for now. Metaxas was just a hypochondriac by all accounts, and had been for much of his life, but it's this point when it really starts to take off.
Right.
So, yeah. And for anyone, honestly, like if you read a decent amount of history and is familiar with these types of characters, like these ambitious, upcoming autocrats and autocrats currently in power, it shouldn't come as much of a shocker. Many autocrats were and still are hypochondriacs, right? Not to compare Metaxas to Stalin and Hitler, but we're going to in this respect. Stalin and Hitler, well-known examples of autocrats. Hugo Chavez, well-known examples of hypochondriacs. Hugo Chavez, Idi Amin, who's fucking a terrifying person. Idi Amin, my God, what a fucking mad man. Hypochondriac. He was a dictator in Uganda. That was it. Uganda. Hypochondriac matches up with these types of people, autocratic type people, because to be autocrat means you want to control everything. And what's the one thing you can't control?
Your health.
Your health, death, more encompassing, right? So it's like, and that's what these people are constantly trying to get out of is death. And in a lot of cases, Metaxas, I don't want to speak for this because, I don't have that written down as memoirs or anything. But, the hypochondria usually tends to match up with autocrats and stuff like that. just to keep in mind where we are at this point, this is kind of that 4-year stint where Venizelos is in charge, and Metaxas, in the meantime, is still working with the royalists, even though he's working with Venizelos as well. But he's working with the royalists to undermine Venizelos and liberals in general because, they hate each other still, right? And I know this is a ton of stuff we're just gliding over. By the way, I mean these are practically primers. Let's be honest. Right. So I just want you to know that, I know there's a lot of stuff I'm skipping over. Stick with me. Appreciate you guys' patience. So, back to April of 1936. Prime Minister Demirziz dies, and the king, without consulting any other party leaders apparently, appoints Metaxas as prime minister. And this is where we had touched off at the end of Primer episode 4, right? Much of Parliament and the populace in general are pretty on edge that this total monarchical fascist is now prime minister. And I would imagine, aside from on edge, that a lot of people are just really stunned, surprised, and in disbelief. The KKE, remember the Communist Party of Greece, immediately comes out and says they need to have a no confidence vote. Which, are you familiar? I don't know how familiar you are with how parliamentary stuff.
Not at all.
Yeah, so a no confidence vote, which is a vote that, if passed, it's a vote that, if passed, means the prime minister has to step down. In a nutshell. I'm not a constitutional parliamentary experts guy, but that's something that happens in European politics. Pretty sure Canada has that type of system. So, that's a mechanism that's in there that you can do to get the prime minister to step down.
Ousted,
exactly. But other parties were scared to push a no confidence vote out of fear that it would provoke a coup. Because they're afraid, if we push the guy, he might just coup himself. Funny. It's not foreboding or anything. So, because a lot of politicians also knew how power hungry Metaxas was and ambitious. They knew his past, and they knew he had been in the Greek political game now for 20 plus years. And keep in mind too, everyone's no dummy. Keep in mind that the military had just been thoroughly purged of Venizelos and Republican officers from the failed Republican and Venizelos coups in 1933 and 1935. Remember, Prime episode 4, whatever. So as much as it is easy to say that Metaxas has the military on his side, which he did, more importantly, he had no one standing in his way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So this guy named Sofoulis, who had taken over Venizelos' spot as leader of the Liberals, pushed through a resolution adjourning Parliament for 5 months. And little did Sofoulis know, no one would see Parliament up and running again until after World War II.
Wow.
Yep. That is the end of the Greek, I guess it's a Greek Republic at this point still, because Metaxas hasn't couped himself. Now, at this point, the communists, seeing the writing on the walls that stopping Metaxas via parliamentary methods had not worked, decided to take other means. They went ahead and made a formal pact with the Socialist Agrarian Party and subsequently raised hell. Strikes across the country took place, and a general strike that May in Thessaloniki, Greece's second largest city, was brutally put down. 30 workers were killed, and roughly 400 were wounded. So just between January and late July of that year of 1936, there were over 240 strikes, costing the national economy around 190 million drachmas. So the Reds decided to keep ramping up the pressure, presumably hoping to facilitate some kind of nationwide overthrow of Metaxas, and a general nationwide strike. So the entire nation, pretty self-explanatory. I think you guys understand the word nationwide, was planned and announced for August 5th. So if you thought what happened in Thessaloniki was bad, just wait until August 5th comes around, right? But as we're going to see, August 5th will never quite come around. Leading up to the general strike, hundreds of labor leaders were arrested and then deported, and conveniently, one day before the nationwide strike on August 4th, Metaxas signed a few decrees declaring a state of emergency and suspended much of the articles of the Constitution having to do with personal liberties or freedoms of any kind. King George II signed off on all of this. Parliament was... Yep, absolutely. This is the point where Metaxas becomes dictator Metaxas. Parliament was dissolved, no future election date was scheduled, and the 4th of August regime is born. After decades of failed coups, exiles, lost elections, and war, Ioannis Metaxas now presides over what he will call the Third Hellenic Civilization as dictator Ioannis Metaxas. And just as Venizelos had his hands full in 1928, so will he. So much to do, so little time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Irate. Danger, irate. Irate. Murder, irate. Irate. Too much confusion.